Ford is not the other guys. At least small block Ford is definitely not. It's definitely one of the guys and not one of the other guys. If it were a 400M, yep, certainly. Even a Cleveland, I think at this point. Any 6-cylinder Ford, any 4-cylinder Ford, all those would be other guys, but not the 5-liter. That's I know the guys would argue about the Coyote being the thing, but to me, the 5-liter Ford is still number one, and in terms of popularity. But tonight I do want to talk about the 5-liter Ford and more in that, not specifically it's a turbo 5-liter Ford, but more specifically how much differently as we evolve in our, go down our path toward performance stardom. Actually, just as we learn more and more things, as we're exposed to more and more things, as we test more and more things, it changes our perspective on things that we would have done back in the day. This test is fairly old. So if you look at the thumbnail, I have a 331 stroker 5-liter. So I'm sure that this short block came from the guys at Coast High Performance, like they all did back in the day. But rather than do the 347 like we normally do, I think we did a 331, which is a 325 stroke. I think that this one was 30 or 40 over. And we, back then, when I was doing this, we were concerned mostly about really kind of the things that were adding power, and then forge internal. So right off the bat, we knew even back then, hey, look, we have a turbo. We're going to run a turbo with this. We're going to run nitrous and a bunch of other stuff, blowers and all kinds of Vortec, all of that stuff. We're going to run all that stuff. So let's put forge internals in. Okay, that makes sense. I think we even put a forge crank in it, even, and we'll talk about that. So forge crank, forge rods, forge pistons. Naturally, we put head studs in it. I didn't normally do like ARP main studs, but we did on occasion, not usually studs. Normally we would just replace the bolts with ARP bolts in the 2-bolt production, 5-liter Ford kind of, thin wall aluminum, not aluminum, but thin wall iron block. And then we put good heads on it. We would put AFR or trick flow or that kind of thing. Okay, well, we need to make power, so we need airflow. And so we want to make good NA power. That was a really critical thing for me back in the day on the 5-liter Ford stuff. So let's run decent heads on it. Like I said, AFR 185s would have been my choice for something like this. The Extreme Energy 274 cam would have been the go-to thing. We used a Holley Systemax on this thing. Or the newer trick flow heads would have also been a popular or a certainly worthwhile like upgrade or thing to include on this combination for the power output that we want. So it was a 331. We're like, okay, this thing's probably going to make over 400 horsepower NA with that cam and those heads and that kind of stuff. We didn't go crazy on the static compression because we were going to do a turbo on it. Had a good intake manifold in that Holley Systemax. Good manifold from back in the day, much better than a HO manifold, much better than a GT40 or Cobra, that kind of thing. Capable of making more power. And then we even did some extrude ported ones, which worked fairly well. And you could make good power. In the end, they're still like a really long runner manifold. And they're not going to do what like something modern like a high ram is going to do. It's just not going to have that same kind of power curve, because it's a different design manifold, not because one necessarily flows so much better than the other. You can get that manifold, like if we, and this is a hard thing for a lot of guys to understand, because I've had this discussion, particularly on the 5-liter Ford side. And the discussion I've had is like, look, we've got our Holley Systemax or whatever. Yeah, we've got it flowing 300 CFM. I'm like, that's fantastic. You can do the same thing to a tune port small block Chevrolet. You can get the runners to flow, put big runners on it, port the heck out of the lower part, port match the upper. And I said, you can get the runners to flow 300, but you haven't changed the length of the runner. So if you haven't changed the length of the runner, the reflected wave is still going to want to happen in the same RPM range. You may change it a little bit from if you change the cross section a fair bit, but you're not going to change it dramatically. And so that, even if you had one that flowed 200 and then one that flowed 300, you're not going to change the effective RPM range dramatically if you don't change the runner length. And so that's one of the things that you have to think about when you're doing this is like, where do I want to make power? And in fact, I had a gentleman ask me about a tune port setup. He wants to use a tune port setup, but he wanted to use it on like a 427 stroker. He said, yeah, I want to make a, he at least he had the right idea about not making very much power, but making a lot of torque. I said, that's exactly what's going to happen. I said, but the problem is that you're putting ported heads and you're making a 427, and then you want to know what cam to use, and then you're putting a tune port manifold on it. I said, that tune port manifold on a 427 is going to make peak power like 4,000 RPM. I said, you're just not going to be able to cam it enough to get it to do anything, even if you like super ported all of that. So, and that will be one of the things that we'll talk about with this 5-liter Ford. So at any rate, we ran you can see if you look at the thumbnail, you can see the turbo kit from HP Performance. We ran, this one was probably like a 72 millimeter turbo or something. It wasn't size really big. We wanted to do what we were doing. If it came from Jimmy and Nathan, it might have even been a whole set or something back then. But it wasn't something where we were going to make a ton of power, because we weren't going to make a ton of power with this motor anyways. So we were concerned with that stuff. We were concerned with, hey, look, let's make good NA power. We can make lots of power at low boosts and go that way. So really what I should have been thinking about was like, look, first of all, Richard, as the customer, how much power do you want to make? Okay, well, let's get the turbo that makes that kind of power. So whatever that turbo was, and I don't even remember now. I didn't look it up before I came here. Probably should have. But what turbo do you want on there that's going to make whatever your desired power output? Is it a G42 like from Richard Holder Performance? Do we want to make 1,000 or 1,100 horsepower? Do we want to do that? Probably not on that motor. But what do we want to do? So let's pick that. That would be first. And I didn't do that back then. So I've changed the way that I approach some of that stuff. The other thing, honestly, it may have been the first thing that I looked at, because it would have helped me decide what turbo to pick on this combination. Because we decided to get a 331 stroker instead of 302, so we could make more power, and good ported head so we can make more power, and the camshaft is kind of the one that I choose for everything, and the intake manifold so we can make more power. And instead of stopping and going, you know what, we're trying to make more power, but why are we trying to make more power? One is that the turbo is going to do that anyway. So whether we put like a GT40 manifold on there, or this manifold on there, or that camshaft, or one slightly smaller, or really good AFR heads, or not great, GT40 X aluminum heads or whatever, none of that would really matter. I mean, it would matter in terms of what boost level we made the power at, but it's still going to do that. But the other thing is that, and this is the thing that I should have realized right away, is like, this has the stock block on it. And I know that guys will say, oh, yeah, I make 1,000,000 horsepower stock blocks. The block's going to break. If we don't break it on the dyno, which I think we could get away with not doing it. I've made, 700 plus on the engine dyno with that by doing, the runs are fairly short stuff. And then not loading it the way that we do. Shock loading, at least it is bad on a for a manual trans car to launch that thing. I think that's hard on cranks and stuff, but I think that's hard on stuff. And so ultimately that factory block would limit what size turbo I would want to run on that thing anyway. So now looking at that project, I would go, okay, this is obviously just going to be a driver. So this is going to be like a 10 or 12 pound turbo thing. And so it's probably going to be 600 or 700 horsepower is where I would put that thing at, and then just hope that I didn't break it in whatever I was doing. For me, that wouldn't be a problem if I put it in my Mustang, because I wouldn't be drag racing it. I wouldn't be taking it out and dumping the clutch and trying to pull the wheels or do any of that stuff. I wouldn't be doing any of that. And so I could drive it around all day and have fun. And I don't even know that I would take something like that Mustang with that much power out to the Silver State and try to run it as fast as it would go. Not anymore, not without going through the car again, because it's been a lot of years and there's a lot of stuff now that would need to be gone through. And plus, if you had a 600 or 700 horsepower Mustang, it'd probably go faster than you would want to go in that kind of race anyway. Faster than you could safely go. You definitely want to shoot on it and stuff, and much more cage in it than it currently has, because it had an SCCA legal like showroom stock cage, which is not what you would want if you're gonna tumble the thing out into the desert at the Silver State at more than 200 miles an hour. You'd want a serious cage in it. So, but I would approach it differently. So like I said, the limitation would be the block. So if you're gonna go, well, I want a G42 turbo instead of a 3584 turbo, and the immediate response and have fun and smoke the tires and do all that, that's all great. And I go to G42 size turbo stuff, I have to have a different block. So I'd have to have a Boss block or a Dart block or something like that. An old A4 block, whatever, just a block that had enough strength in it so that I could do what I wanted to do, or just an LS block. You could do it with that. But that would be the limiting thing. And then I would pick other things differently also. Like anymore, if I was putting one of those together, I'd put a high ram on it just because I would want to try something new. I know that the high ram is going to be awesome. And I'm really excited about eventually trying one sometime and finding out how well it does and find out what kind of power curve. Now, I know it's going to be a high RPM kind of thing, but that's okay. It's going to make more than enough power for what we would be trying to do with it anyway. I mean, if you took a high ram and airflow research heads and, a decent kind of camshaft and then a turbo on it, it's going to make a lot of power. It's going to make as much power as you want to make with that turbo. And it'd easily do that. And then the problem is, like with always, do you have the transmission for that? Do you have the rear end? Do you have all that stuff? But I would definitely approach it differently. And I would look at those two major things. Like, okay, what turbo do I want? Oh, well, everybody wants 1,000 horsepower. So we would pick 1,000 horsepower turbo. Oh, you can't do that. Big warning sign. That block is not going to do that. That block is not a G42 block. You have to pick something else, a different turbo or a different block in order to kind of do that. But I have to say, I look fondly back at all that stuff 10 or 20 years ago or whatever that we did the testing and building those 5-liter Fords and stuff. That was awesome. I mean, it was cool to build the motors and then run a bunch of stuff on them, run that HP Performance Turbo Kit, we ran, first thing we would do normally is run the thing naturally aspirated, and then we put nitrous on it just because it was so easy to do. And it's one of the things that you can easily get done, while you're there doing the dyno testing. You're like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to throw nitrous at it. And then we'll have to take it off probably. And then unless we prepped everything for the turbo kit or the Vortec, a lot of times if we did a Vortec or ProCharger or whatever, we would just have the blower already set up on there. And we would have already configured it. We've already run the belt. We've already done all that stuff. And then we just run it without that, just run it NA and do that. We could even run it with nitrous and do that. And then just hook the blower up. And then that way, because when dyno time is expensive as it is, you want to try to maximize all the things that you can done as quickly as possible. You don't want to be building stuff with a motor on the dyno. That's just like sitting there in a taxi with with the meter running and you're ordering coffee or whatever, and you just don't want to be doing that. But 5-liter Ford was awesome. The other thing I probably wouldn't do is unless I was doing G42's kind of power build, I wouldn't necessarily pick a steel crank anymore either. I just pick a cast crank. And then if I was doing Ford rods and Ford pistons, that's fine. I probably would do that and not do, because we had to do that since we did a stroker anyway. So the 5.4 rods and Ford's pistons with valve relief, so that you don't have to worry about any of that for the different valve orientations. If it was a twisted wedge head, if it was a bigger valve, airflow research heads, you could, that way you could get, if you wanted to run an NA and you wanted to rev it up, like you want to build a high ram kind of thing with a good head and put more camshaft in it, like run that XFI cam, that 236 cam, put valve reliefs in it. So you could do that if you wanted to have a 7,000 RPM motor and really rev it up and have some fun with it. NA anyways. And then also it would also serve to be able to run, if we wanted to run a Vortec on it, if we wanted to run the turbo on, if we wanted to run, even a Roots blower or Kenny Bell or whatever we want to run on there, it would be already set up for that. Let's see what you guys got going on. So start a poll. Okay, start a poll. Well, we're going to have to end the poll because I didn't even write anything. So I think I have to write something. Okay, would you build a motor differently today than you would have 10 or 15 years ago? Would your thought process be different? Would your ability be different? Would all those things be different? Jet Black, Crash, what's going on? Cars and stuff. Old school 5-liter push rod is a whole lot more affordable. Yep. I saw the guys from Tukes at Street Alpha was interviewing somebody about coyotes, and I thought it was interesting that I don't know who the guy he was. I think he's a big horsepower coyote guy. I'm not in those circles, so I don't know. Didn't recognize him, but I was watching some of it, and I thought it was interesting that he was trying to make a case that a coyote is somehow affordable power. I don't get that. Old school 5-liter push rod is a whole lot more affordable, especially considering if you have a Fox body, you already have it in the car. Yeah, I agree. It is a lot easier than doing a swap. Evening, is an eBay GT45 too big of a turbo for a street-driven 89 Mustang shooting for 530 horsepower? But I remember something about 500 horsepower was the limit for that block. Yeah, the block might be an issue, but the GT45 will support more than 530 horsepower. I'm adding, and they're inexpensive. It's just not very responsive, but it will definitely work. I'm adding a turbo to my Fox, the 331, TFS 11Rs. Nice. All that's good stuff. Camshafts is trick flow stage 5. I know it's a lot of duration. It will be okay. Should I change the cam? If you're going to put a turbo in it, that's completely the wrong cam. Not that every cam isn't a turbo cam. It is. But that cam in a 331 is going to want to make power like way, way out there. And it's going to be really soft down low. So I'm curious why you did you ever run this motor like this? So you should go to stage 1 cam on this and then put the turbo on it, and you'll be much happier. I thought all Mustangs have been LS swap. There's a few running around here. Mine has not been swapped. Not yet. It's mind-blowing, fascinating that air can change directions and make pressure waves fast enough to make consistent power at a specific RPM. Richard, you'd be in your element right now in Queensland, Australia? There are a lot of snakes about, right? I mean, the King Browns. Yeah, you don't really want to mess with those too much. I watch a lot of snake guys in Australia that do. They go and do rescues. I mean, they're technically rescuing the snake, I guess, because the people are not killing it, which is good. But they go to the houses and stuff because people call them. And they catch them like they do here for rattlesnakes, and they do I watch the guys in India that do it. Mainly they get cobras, but also other kinds of vipers and asps and stuff. But also in the browns are really popular in the red bellies in Australia. So I watch the guys go get those, and the browns get big too. All cams are turbo cams. Think about pulling my Novi 2000, go the turbo setup. I'm tired of belt slipping. Belt slippage is kind of a pain for blower stuff. It can be. And so a cog belt really cures that. So that's kind of nice. But that also can be problematic. But a turbo, you don't have to worry about that. Finished building a 6-liter for my Avalanche. Went with a low buck truck cam. First start today. And I'm working on the tune. Nice. So make sure to check in and let us know how it goes. Should have a little bit of chop at idle. Not a ton, but some on a 6-liter. But it should be a good one. Do you have a stock converter with that? Any build suggestions for reliable 87 Chevy 350 with TPI? Aiming for 400 or 450 horsepower. Having trouble making parts lists that let me keep the TPI look. If I can keep the look. Yeah, the mini RAM is a good choice. The stealth RAM, if you can find those, also make good power. The high RAM is good, although that's not going to have that dual throttle body thing. All of those are going to be able to make power at a higher engine speed. If it's just for looks, and you could do with all the ported TPI stuff, you could do it that way. It's just never going to. It's 450 horsepower is going to be hard to do unless you did it with a bigger motor, the 383, and then it's going to be cammed so much that it's just not going to be. It's not going to work that well. Plan on a daily driver. It'd be a lot easier with the carburetor. Any experience with barrel type liquid to air intercoolers? Mean like the chili bomb? Is that what type you're talking about? 87 TPI 350 is going to need some better heads and intake. Yeah. It's going to need all that. Did you ever come back to the Buick 455? Thought you're not done. Add TA heads. The TA heads I sent back. I have some Edelbrocks, though. Better parts are available. If you're a daily driver, leave it alone. 259, 275 at 50, spraying. Up to 350, 12 to 1, 400 small block. Do you think I'm going to benefit with longer exhaust duration? Or should I swap it to something like you use on your 400 build? You already have a lot of exhaust duration. I mean, that's a 16-degree split. But given what I think that small block 400 should make, I think you could run more nitrous on it. I think you're probably only a little more than halfway, like at 50% of what the NA power output is. 10 to 15 years ago, I would look at engine upgrades for power, and I just look at the RHE engine as an air pump, as the engine. Yep. Ken Dig had a Pantera with a Coyote engine. It made 340 on the chassis now. My girlfriend left and said that her Porsche makes 500. Yeah. Brand new personal best. My stock E7 5-liter turbo T5. Ooh, 136.60. That's hooking up good. 699 at 96, 1087 at 122. That's good. Which option would you choose in block splitting territory, factory block, or an aftermarket 8.2 deck? I myself would pick a factory 351 because I think it'd be way cheaper than any sort of aftermarket block. And I don't even want to know what an aftermarket block costs nowadays. But a 351 is just a junkyard thing. And I wouldn't have problem going to, I don't know, let's say 1,000 horsepower on a 351 block. Jim, I'd use the World Products Motown. Where's your shop located when I need a motor built? I'd like to come. I don't have a shop. I don't build motors. I just build my own, and then I test them. For a work truck that hauls 12,000 daily with an LQ4 shooting for 600 horsepower, what turbo would you choose? I think you could do I don't know. Maybe I would look at one of Iron's S475s for that or something. Not S475, like a 7875. You probably could get away with an inexpensive as cast one for that low power. You could put a 3584 on there, but I don't think that I would do that. And a G42 600 would be just kind of the starting point, I think, for that. Although Lucky sent me video clips of him in Butternuts. He's got a 5.3 rear-mounted turbo with our G42 on it, and he sent me some videos of him power braking and smoking the tires going across the intersection or whatever. And he's just laughing and giggling, like, because that's Lucky. So it worked, and that's only at 8 pounds. So that at 8 pounds, that motor combination, that 5.3 is not making 600 horsepower. So it still works there. And Jimmy's running around the Tahoe with a G42. Might have the 3584 in there now, but we had the G42 in there with basically a stock 5.3, and it worked fine on the street. I would have no problem with having it. Low truck cam, do you have to change the springs? Yes. Mainly just going for sound and Impala. Yeah, you have to change the springs. Buy the cam and springs together. Does every chat just turn into an LS chat? No, we're talking about all of it. Would you recommend a trustworthy place to get a motor built? I don't know what city or town or country, since this is worldwide. So I don't know where you are. Lucky's been doing some freeway lineups. Just got a Speedway Dart copy block, 9.5, 425 bore, shipped to my house with 1,700. Wow. That's a lot less than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a few $1,000s. I've lost thousands in shifty work. Jerry, what is it you're trying to build? Why don't you tell us what you're wanting to put together? Big turbo for towing is ideal because you have all the time in the world to spool it. A small turbo for towing is not ideal. And although the OEMs all use small turbos for trucks. And I have used the Speedmaster stuff too, their blocks before, just to make sure that it's machined properly. Oh, thousands in shifty work. Then I got a Jericho. Nice. So, Jerry, what are you wanting to do to a 5.3 LS? It's all that's really, really easy, unless you're building something really wild and exotic. And just so you guys know, as a little top secret thing, I'm going down to West Tech, and we're going to be running the prototype of an 8.1 cam, first of two. So we'll be testing that on the dyno. OEM turbo engines are plagued with problems when you start working on them. Yeah, so Jerry, let me know what you're trying to do with a 5.3. I have endless videos up on that. Would you build a motor differently today than you would have 10 or 15 years ago? 89% are saying yes. And the other people are just lying. It's just straight up. I did a lot of 5-liter Fords way back in the day. Put together a bunch of those. That's what I did. My first book was 5-liter Fords, and so we did a lot of testing on that stuff. I got 100 psi crank compression on my 302 Fox after I had GT40s milled 10 with a valve job. No blow by, just low compression, runs pretty good. 100 psi of cranking compression seems way low. Does it have a really big cam in it or something? But as long as they're all even, that would be better than it not being even. Same as a dart, I will start with line honing. I'm actually taking this block to 455 to build a 461. Wonder why 8.1 wasn't more popular for hot rodding. And you get off that torque management stuff. I can't believe that. I would have thought that and maybe they did, but I would have thought that the programmers, the tuners, would have jumped all over that, because that's an application where you'd look like a hero to get rid of torque management on those things. Now, I don't know how long the transmissions last if you do that, but you certainly could pick up. I mean, they left a ton of power on the table with those. These days, I'm not letting the magic out. Did you see the engine power episode with the 427 LS with the trick flow heads and Summit cam? It made 540 where the Hank's holding it back. I haven't watched that. I'll have to check it out. Even a 6-liter, about 350, 400 horsepower, I'd be happy. It's going in an S10. Well, for 400 horsepower, all you need is a 5.3 with our cam and like our low buck truck cam and springs, and put injectors in it, and it will make at least 400. It'd probably be closer to 425. We have a 351, probably needs a rebuild, that we pulled from a pick and pull last year. A better fit for that GT45. Side note, we had carbon seals installed on that turbo. Are you going to run it as a draw-through carbureted thing? The GT45 will work fine on a 302. It's just that turbo itself. I mean, you could make it more responsive if you make the motor bigger, but that turbo is not terribly responsive for the kind of power that it puts out. The engine power 427 is limited by the manifold. I don't know what combination they have there. Setup is like a T1 draw through. So are you putting a throttle body in front of it, or are you putting a carburetor in front of it? What are your thoughts on modern metal treatments? I've never tested them, so I would assume that they work. I just don't know how much. Like, I don't know how much better they make stuff. Coatings on pistons and stuff definitely work. And things like DLC, the diamond light coating, all of those absolutely work for what they're intended to do. But and you know, if you can ask Dan here, talk to him about some of the cup stuff. That's a requirement for a lot of the stuff that they're doing, and so those definitely work. But for a junkyard guy's not going to use that though. I think it's a good idea on the skirts. It stops the thing from. I think it could make the skirts last longer and stop them from scuffing. But I just don't know what it costs relative to just going and getting another wrecking yard motor. I did rebuild the same motor almost 10 years ago, 10 years apart. The first time I was slopping it together with a cam that didn't suit it. And this time I measured clearances and gapped the rings. Yeah, that happens. And then the mistakes that you made, like I said, I mean, I didn't make a mistake of putting too big of a cam in it, but that's a common thing though. You're going to test ACZFI? I don't plan to because I don't have any of that. Running stock cam, don't know why the low compression would be timing chain or push rod length. Push rod length, it'd have to almost be hanging the valve open, so that would not be a thing probably. But timing chain could definitely affect that. Throttle body like on the T1 Turbo Dodge, okay. Which 60-degree V6, J35, Ford 3537, something else, lightweight, rural drive, hill climb project. I think I might be biased, but I'd have to lean towards a J series Honda. There's lots of stuff for them, and you can make lots of power with them. Torque management is active for a few microseconds during shifts. You can shorten shift times and get less torque management time, but disabling is just for a little bit of gain. For in between shifts, yeah, I agree. But they have torque management in those tunes to limit power also. I was building B series 15 years ago. I do the same again. Yeah, I agree. I would put a B series together the same way that I did 15 years ago. Although I don't know that I would now. I think that I would do it differently. I mean, I think I did a fair job of doing the Bonneville stuff, and that worked out really well. But I would definitely pick a different turbo. 100% I'd pick a different turbo. Coating on skirts works great. Other places, not so much. The piston top coating never seemed to do much except cost money. Yeah, I don't know about the tops. I've seen the barrier coatings and I've seen the arguments for that. In fact, Vizard was telling me about that for the ports in the head, and I'm like, I don't know. I just am not. I want that to work. I want that to be something, but is it really? I do smaller rings, 1 millimeter or so, unlike in the past. Yeah, I don't know that I would go with that. On a street kind of thing, maybe on a Engine Masters kind of thing, I would. Richard, longtime watcher, welcome. First time asking a question, welcome. I have a 302 in my 90 Mustang. Very nice. I have an 88. It's a twin turbo Borg Warner 6068 setup. I heard a lifter. I have a cam question. All right. If it's a 90, it's a hydraulic roller. How did you hurt a lifter in it? 1.5, 1.5, 3 millimeter stuff. Yeah, no, that's, and then a lot of guys would do, might add gas porting to that. And then guys like to play with the tension on those too. 4.8 small block Ford with forged internals, 205, 10.3, kind of run 10 to 14 pounds is a huge gap. That's like 100 horsepower gap on pump gas with a conservative tune. Yes, you can. You could take away enough timing and have it not make power and run that boost level. I don't know why you would, but you can. I think I would concentrate more on running the amount of boost that you can successfully run on pump gas and have the thing be fun rather than go into this thinking a specific boost level. Because I've never found that to be a successful path. I do Cerakote to the top of the pistons. Top fuel teams do it, so it must help with extreme heat. Dan, you want to chime in on that? It's an old SVO A4 block. I have had those. The lifter spun and the dog bone. The dog bone broke. So what I would want to know is how did that happen? Like what jammed against what to rotate the lifter did the or what broke the link bar, like what happened to make all that, to facilitate all that. But you can ask your cam question. Torque management absolutely is a thing on 8100s. If you're pulling a trailer up a hill, it will absolutely make more power with a cruise control engage versus foot pedal. It's designed to do that. It's designed to make more power with the in cruise control. I had no idea it did that. I would like to see a truck with one of those. Maybe I can ask Mike about his. He's got a turbo on his, but I'd like to see what the I'd like to see what the factory timing and stuff is doing. Or does it have a drive-by-wire throttle body? I'm sure it does, right? DLC coating a camshaft and associated parts seems smart for the long haul. Definitely on things like I've seen guys do lifters, but definitely on piston pins. Top Fuel does, but that's an entirely different beast. Not really comparing apples. Oh, on a top, yeah, Top Fuel motor doesn't. I don't think translates down to us lesser people. Late to the party. I don't know if I build it differently, but I'd probably use different parts. Well, that's different. It's running a 223, 238 roller cam. I have a smaller 216, 228. For your conversation, run a model the camera with boost. Okay. I'm trying to. I want to go back and see what your. What size is that motor? Work out on your SVO A4 block. What displacement is it, and what heads does it have and stuff? Should you be able to run 1.7 rockers with stock push rods on what motor are you talking about? On an LS, absolutely, because that's what it came with. On a Ford, the ratio shouldn't change that, but it can. It can. I've had rocker swaps necessitate a push rod change. We usually measure that to see. The Escalades in some platforms had to reduce torque by gear, and that limited power in lower gears. That's what I was thinking. It was in the lower gears. I checked the springs, and they had worn out, and I think there was some aggressive, not controlled lifters. Okay. Did you have springs break, or were they getting coil bind or something weird? Because the first thing I'd want to do is solve that problem, and then go on to whatever else you want to do. Let's say you built different as techniques or processes. Well, that could also be different. All of it would be different. Do you now do more things that you didn't do? Do you do them differently? Would you pick different parts? Would you not do some of the stuff that you did? Would you just go, yeah, I'm not doing that? 40 over 308. I have some old twisted wedge heads on it. No springs broke. Okay. So, and then what intake are you running? And then what are you have it in? Like, what are you trying to do? What kind of power you're trying to make? Because 216 cam with old twisted wedge heads and some sort of EFI manifold is going to be like a 350 horsepower motor or thereabouts. It's going to be definitely a sub 400 horsepower motor. Especially with the original twisted wedge, those are 240 CFM or so. I like those heads though. Thanks for the great content. As always, happy to help. I remember how excited I was when we were doing the Ford stuff, putting together an aluminum Ford 427. And then also even doing the Windsors for the first time, the 408 stuff that we did, 392. We had some West Tech had a 392 that they got from the guys at Ford Racing. They supplied it. And I'm sure I ran more tests than everybody else combined, I'm sure, because they were supposed to use it at West Tech for the for the magazine guys, but a couple of the guys would go there and do it, like Freiberger. He might have done something. Jeff Smith might have done something. A couple of those guys, but nobody went there and just ran the dog snot out of it like I did. 93 cast Cobra intake. This is a streetcar T56 in it. Nice. Not looking for max output, but 600 to 700 would work. So you're going to run a turbo on this now? I thought the top fill coatings are more of a hard anodizing than a sprayed on thing. I could ask my friend if there's anything new. I was thinking that they did that. I thought it was that kind of coating and not a spray on, but I don't know. 11R heads are so good for the stock bottom end, but so expensive. Yeah, they are. They're nice. And I remember opening the first set of those. I'm like, ooh, these like are chock full of ability goodness. I like these heads. But LS2 from an 05 Corvette, got to hold an LSA blower for cheap. Do you think it's worth upgrading the heads over using adapters? I would worry less about using adapters with that blower, and not specifically because Boost does anything, but that blower manifold doesn't seem to suffer as much because of the entry on the short runner blower manifold with the adapters. And you just, if it does, you just add another pound of boost or whatever, and it works just fine. If that's a cheaper way to go, and the heads that you have on it, you have an LS2, so you have 243 heads. Of all of the cathedral port heads, those are the best. Now, they're not as good as a LS3 head, but the problem is that you would be losing compression if you go from the 243 head to the 821 head or 823 head. You would be losing compression, but that might be okay. And then you'd be gaining flow. So the head will make more power. If you put the rec port heads on, they will make more power by themselves. And then maybe you squeeze a little bit more out because you don't have the adapters. So if you do the rec port upgrade, irrespective of the adapter thing, you're going to make more power. It's just going to be a little softer down low. Now that might not be a problem. Lowering the compression, having it be a little softer down low. Maybe you can make some of that up with timing because you don't have the same detonation threshold. All that's, I don't think there's a bad choice there. 216, 228 cam, have an intake of 107, 117, LSA is 112. Is this 5 to 8 advanced already ground in? Yes, twin turbos. Okay. So that cam will be fine. You have it's 112 plus 5. So that's just relative to the piston position. I don't know why they would have advanced at 5, but they can. But that should work really good. That camshaft will be fine. I still want aluminum heads for Cleveland. Seem more affordable. Yeah, they do. There's and lots of different companies make them now. These Crane Cobra 172 rockers with stock length push rods and F cam back in the day. Shim the rockers for preload. The pattern came out good to the stock length. Yeah, if you rather than change the push rod, if you change the rocker stand, you can get away with that. Excuse me, is running methanol injection on top of BT5 worth the added complexity for IATs or detonation threshold? I don't think that that's necessary for most things. I don't know. Are you running a lot of boost or something? Once somebody goes to E85, they usually aren't concerned with detonation thresholds. I'm hoping that you're running an intercooler. If you're not running an intercooler, then you can add water methanol injection for charge cooling, but it doesn't work as well as an intercooler. 408 small block Ford, 1,000 horsepower, should be close to 550 NA. Yeah, if you're making 500, it can get to 1,000 at 15 pounds or whatever. And again, I wouldn't run that cam, but for a turbo one, but you can. I drove a few semis that had big turbos that were very sluggish, empty, and depressing to drive. But once you had a heavy load, they were in boosts already. They worked better and more power than stock. Should I install it at 107 or could I advance it more for better spool? I wouldn't try to play with that because you don't know that advancing it necessarily is going to do anything for spool. For what you're doing, you could put one of our GTX 3584 RS turbos on it and not worry about spool. You will have all the spool that you want. If the cam is labeled +5, it already has 5 degrees of advance ground into it. It's the valve vent relative to piston position. I want to make a 427 Chevy out of a Gen 6 454 and a 427 crank. Yeah, why do you, yeah, you can do that. That's fine. But my question is, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to make less power? 7,000 RPM, if you want to rev to 7,000 RPM with a 454, you just rev the 454 to 7,000. You just put enough camshaft in it and enough cylinder head and enough intake manifold on it and rev it to 7,000. The crank will not stop you from doing that. The 427 is just going to make less power. But I'm all for the project. Get away, what's going on? Going to get like 20 degrees Fahrenheit tonight. Oh, that is cold. You got us beat. It's 40 right now here. We might get into the 30s. Use all the cubes. How much do you think you can push the LSA blower on that LS2 with stock bottom end? I heard there are blower limitations. Yeah, I don't think I would try to make all the power with that blower. As you get closer and closer to whatever that blower will flow, most guys that are making lots of power with those have ported blowers. They have bigger entries. They have ported discharges. They do that stuff. And then they also have motors where they did at least ring gap. They added ring gap. We had a Cat C15 Acert engine that came with compound turbos and 50 pounds of boost. Yeah, I remember how disappointed I was with the turbo diesel stuff. That adding fuel seemed to make a lot more power than the turbo did. Or I should say not than the turbo did. Made a lot more power than adding boost from the turbo. Because like we changed the boost like 10 pounds on I had a Dodge Ram with a Cummins in it. And we, fiddled with the wastegate control or whatever. And then I think we changed the boost by a lot. Like I said, it was like 10 pounds. I'm like, this doesn't seem like, because when you add 10 pounds to a gas engine that you've added the necessary fuel to, it makes a big difference. In the diesel, it didn't do that because we hadn't added the necessary fuel yet. Can't get the harness to come through the firewall on a 97 EK sedan. So I guess I'm going to take the dash off. You can just drill a hole in it. Ring gap is a must. Yep. And more, I would argue more so for the blower than the turbo. Temperatures are probably going to be higher coming out of the blower. Although that does have an air-to-water intercooler like brick underneath it, which is always good. That less stroke would make it rev faster and better up top. I just hate a lazy revving big block externally balanced. Yeah, I don't understand what the lazy revving thing is. I don't understand I look at the power output on the dyno because that dictates acceleration. So I don't do snap rev things to see how quickly it revs. But the stroke won't do anything, but like I said, it just makes the motor smaller and it will just make less power. It's like a 4.8 versus a 5.3. Do you want a 4.8 because it's snappier and it revs better because it's got a shorter stroke? That's great. It just makes less power than a 5.3 does. I think I've learned or heard you say that when you look at the power potential of cylinder heads, double the CFM number. I assume this is for crank horsepower. Yes, and that's only for a V8. You have to multiply it by 0.75 if it's a V6 or 0.5, or just use the flow number itself for a 4-cylinder. An Explorer shirt blocks you did. What did you get the rings to for boost? 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So 24, 6 thousandths to 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So like 25 or so. Stroke doesn't determine snappiness. No, I agree. It doesn't at all. I would bet what's the stroke on a Pro Stock motor? What I do different now is MLS gaskets when possible. Yeah. I'm thinking I'm making my own intercooler setup for the blower. Should be good temps. There you go. 6 pounds of boost will get a 44 revving like a rotary. Just threw in your low buckshot cam. Nice. And my Elm 7 was curious what horsepower I'd make with CNC ported 706s with big valves and a fast intake. I don't know. That cam is not going to be able to take advantage of those heads if they're done professionally and that intake manifold. But I can't remember. I'd have to look back and see on the L33 if we ran anything like that. I don't remember running either the truck Norris cam or our low buck truck cam with those ported heads and the fast intake manifold. I think we did run the truck plus, and I think we didn't make 500 with that. I think it was 490 or something, 488. So it'd be, I don't know, let's say you could get to 460 or 470 or something like that, maybe the way that we test it. If everything was as good as what we do. For the diesel, try to smoke a unique way, heated the intake charge, really crazy stuff, but it made power and mileage. The diesel stuff is easy. You just spray fuel in it. You can spray nitrous in there. You can spray methanol in there. You can spray diesel in there. It likes when you add fuel to it. Big blocks of the turbo can make big power all day. Yep. Most early diesel's fixed turbos are way overboosted for the power they make. BGT can get closer because they aren't relying on the torque reserve for throttle response. Pro stock stroke is small. They are at 3.6. Okay. Thanks for everything you've done for the community. You're welcome. I've seen a few of the vids you've made on LS superchargers. As of today, what's the best budget supercharger for the LS? Still a GT500? I don't know. If you're talking about a positive displacement blower, that guy at and I've never met him, but at SWS, I think is the name of his company. He does those adapter plates like Tom Demuse did. He does kits so that you can put these other kinds of blowers on them. I don't know if GT500 is still affordable blowers anymore. I saw that he did one for the Rover blowers, which a lot of guys don't know about. So a smaller cam makes less NA power. So to reach 1,000 horsepower, I'd need to run more boost to get there. Yes. Top fuel uses a 4.5-inch stroke and spin to 8,800 or so through the lights. So the engines are pretty snappy, yeah. Wacko. Best supercharger for the LSR is the IHI Hellcat blower. Yeah, I don't know about best, but that's another option. There are kits to put a Hellcat blower on there. I think Kenny Bell is going to come back out with LS kits, which I wish they would. Jim should have done that long ago. And so at least for sand rails or something. You looked at the GT500s are still affordable. Okay. I just don't know how much all of the stuff is. One thing I do know, an M90 supercharger is really inexpensive, but there's just not very much power available from them. Building a 302 at the moment, doing a girdle, stage 1, trick flow, cam, on 3 turbo. What kind of power do you think you expect? I don't know what turbo you're using, because whatever turbo you're using is the thing that will dictate the power there up until the limit of that stock block. My piston to wall. Okay, it was so tight I had to use a sledgehammer to get the pistons and cylinders. I hope it runs good. Yep, that's all going to be good. 70 millimeter turbo. Yeah, you can ask the On3 guys what that turbo will support. I've never tested any of their stuff, so I don't know. A 70 millimeter, if it's like which I suspect it is, like a GT45 kind of thing, that's like a 750 horsepower kind of turbo. Might be 800 if it's a newer variant of those turbos. The GT45 is really old, so it's not as good. Jaguar 5-liter Land Rover TVR superchargers are 500 on eBay. Okay, yeah, and I'm not even thinking of buying one from somebody else. I'm thinking about going to a wrecking yard and getting one. It is the way that I would do the low buck blower thing. because you can get it at the wrecking yard less than somebody who already went to the wrecking yard and got it and now is trying to resell it and make $100 or whatever. I'm going to build a North Star for my Seville. I'm thinking of asymmetrical turbo to get me 500 to 600 horsepower. Stock is 300. What turbo and wastegate would you suggest? I think you probably could try one of our 30 G30 770s. I think that small motor might asymmetrically spin that turbo. The 3584 is going to be too big for that. The 3582, I think, will also be too big for that. But the 3070, the G3770, I think will work for what you're trying to do. And we have them as twins. We have them in mirror image stuff, but we also have them individually. So I think I would try that turbo, because isn't that motor a 4.6 or something? So it's even smaller than the 5.3. And when we ran the 5.3, it was a fairly good one, 400 plus horsepower, let's say. And the exhaust from that had a rising boost curve and only got to, peak boost at the peak RPM. Only one turbo for an engine with two of everything. Yeah, Jim, I'm curious, why would you do asymmetrical on that? What's the price at your local for a blower intake OEM deal? I don't know. I haven't looked at them. Front cylinders are the ones pulling. That $100 can save a decent amount of time. It can, if that's the difference. I'm just using that as an example. But the bad thing is that you don't get to go to the wrecking yard. That's like a trip to Disneyland. That's like dirty Disneyland. Thoughts on carb style open plenum EFI intake with an elbow for turbo setup versus typical EFI intakes like the systems or Cobra intake manifolds? Well, I don't care about the elbow, but a single plane intake manifold, which I think is what you're talking about, versus any sort of long runner manifold is going to be dramatically different in power curves. What's the store called? Our store is called richardholdnerperformance.com. It's a Shopify. Here, I will write it down. There you go. Google Richard Holdner Performance. Except spell it differently than that. Hodner. I love it. Look how white that is. .46 32 valve, yeah. Difficulty getting pipes from the back sides of the engine. Yeah, no, I get it. And a 4.6 32 valve 4.6 is probably going to be soft down low. El Point and go to the yard is a good time. I enjoy it. And in fact, when I go down to West Tech, I might cruise over and just reminisce. What's the highest horsepower you've gotten out of one of your 302 builds? We've done more than 1,000 horsepower on one that has a good block on it. But I've never tried to do most kind of things. Almost none of the stuff I do is ever like that. I don't do, I need to make 1,000 horsepower, 1,500, 2,000 horsepower. I don't ever do that. That's never one of the goals of my things. They're always, hey, what happens if we do this? What happens if we add a turbo to this and we run the boost up to whatever this level is? What happens if we then change the camshaft? What happens if we then change the intake manifold or the cylinder heads or that kind of thing? It's all more to help teach people stuff. It's never the most kind of things. Richard, I came across you a few weeks ago building an LS Gen 3 for an S10. Nice. Can't wait to get the turbo kit on everything and see what I can do. Yeah, that should be fun. I really would, I may try to talk Jimmy into doing an S10 this year. Me and my typos, yep. Thought of returning back to your roots to do some Honda stuff. Would love to see you run some K series and L series. We are going to do that. We're already doing that. Jimmy has an F series S2000, and he got it running this weekend. It has one of our G30 turbos on it. We're going to try the other turbos on that. He also has a J series in his NSX because he J swapped the NSX. So we're going to do a bunch of stuff on that. Dan, we know you're feeling on North Stars. Have you tried using one of the AIs to create a tune and see how well it works? Have I ever tried that? No. No, we have tuners that are doing that. So our poll, we'll leave our poll at 90%. The Bonneville card's coming good. Slow, cold, but good. Two more minutes. 2 more moments. Richard, make me want to mortgage my house. Don't do that. So as to buy an engine dyno for the master bedroom walk-in closet conversion. There you go. Why did Ford make a 5.2 flat crank GT350 and a crossplane GT500? I think after they went down the road of making the flat plane crank, they were like, yeah, we're never doing this again. They had a lot of issues with it, a lot of vibration issues. The GT500 with the blower on it has all the things that it needs with terms of power. It doesn't need to be a flat plane crank deal with more problems. North Star engine sounded so promising when Freiberg told me about them. I told my girlfriend about your half-hour wide open throttle story. She thought it was great. It was fun. I don't know. Maybe I'd try that again. I would like to go out to that race again, just to go out with my buddies and do it again. I have a 347 base Dart Holly high-rise inlet 185. Oh, that's good. Going my first turbo setup. I've gone for a log exhaust turbo type setup. Now turbo and boost control to get advice. I'm lost. Well, how much power do you want to make? And if you tell me how much power you want to make, I'll tell you which one of our turbos that you should get. I would run a smaller cam, my 408 small block today to run boost. 550 NA and a 2,500 pound car, 6 should be fine. 1,000 would be great. Yeah, I mean, I don't. If you have a 2,500 pound car and it's a manual trans, and you have 550 NA horsepower, I think you're going to be good. I think you're 500. I think you're fine. John, you want 800? Okay, so go to richardholdenerperformance.com and go to get our G42 turbo. That will easily do that, and then also give you plenty of room for growth. Maybe you guys could design J-series intakes for blowers. I kind of want to look into that, although I think maybe that SWS guy has already done that or is thinking about doing that. I wonder why the 5.2 had vibration issues when plenty of other V8 and V10, V8 and V10 flat plane crank stuff. Everyone who's ever done a flat plane crank has vibration issues. Ferrari did. They had to change their motor mounts and stuff. Makes 500 at the wheels right now. Your 347 makes 500 at the tire right now. That seems high for that combination that you're telling me about. Does it have a really big camshaft in it or something? Richard, once you get used to it, I'm going to want more boost. So happy to have the mirror twins out now. I know those are good. Yeah, we have the mirror image G3770s and the mirror image 3582s. If you make J-series centrifugal mounts brackets would be cool too. Anything else? I just don't think that would sell very well. Because once you put a turbo on a J-series, although I have seen blowers on them. And actually, an M90 on a J series would be really good. You have a big camshaft on. Okay, yeah. If you're making 500 at the tire and you're saying that a 347's got to be making 600 to flywheel to do that, that's a lot of power on a 347. Do 1.6 rockers change duration compared to 1.5 rockers? Yeah, by a couple of degrees. O3 2500 LQ4 243 heads TSP cam 214 222. Okay, what is your question? Seen a plate that puts an M90 on the stock intake lid? Yeah, that's the way to do it. Stock convertible. I want to make more power. I don't know what turbo. Oh, okay. How much power do you want to make for your turbo? Can you put a 3-inch blower drive pulley on the front of a K24? I don't think that there's room there. At a solid cam 251 at 50. Okay. That's a big cam. My daily as of now is a 1984 Land Cruiser. 125 horsepower. Nice. 200 foot-pounds. 1800. 4.2 liter. Redline's 4,000. Needs a 6-liter. Yeah, a 6-liter swap, even a 4.8 swap, like a stock one, would be a really big upgrade compared to that. That'd be night and day. It'd be 2 or 3 times the horsepower, probably. It'd be a lot more. On that note, it is time to go. I will see you guys all maybe tomorrow, but I probably might be traveling or something. We'll see. Thanks for showing up. Make sure to check out richholderperformance.com. I'll see you guys all later.